Hey everybody, I am your host, Allah. Today I'm reporting to you from Times Square in New York City at a Free Hong Kong protest. Let's go talk to some folks, see what's going on. So we're out here today in Times Square for a Free Hong Kong protest. Can you tell me a little bit more about what compelled you to come out here today?
Just the passing of the national security law in Hong Kong. My folks are originally from there, and I visited a lot as a kid, so it's a sentimental place to me. And it's just, as an American, I think we should use our voice to speak up for those who literally have no longer the right to speak for themselves, which is what I think more like rallies like this should be about, so that we can find ways to organize and find ways for America to use its powers to actually help people that need it. Because I think it's a bipartisan agreement right now, like that both sides agree that what's happening in Hong Kong isn't right, and it's also one way to bring the country together, because the left and the right are so divided, but this is one thing they could definitely agree on.
I wanted to ask you, Secretary Pompeo a few weeks ago said Hong Kong officially kind of lost autonomy within its borders over there. What do you think the United States should do moving forward? I know Trump says he's tough on China with all this trade stuff. Do you think Trump's effective here being tough on China? How can we get Americans interested, on something that's going on the other side of the planet in this way?
I think it's important to point out certain biases certain companies are committing, such as the NBA, and how they'll print pretty much anything on the jerseys. There was a list that someone found of like derogatory things you could put on the jerseys, but Free Hong Kong wasn't allowed. That just says a lot to how they're trying to appease the masters of Beijing. And after everything that happened with the virus, causing them to lose their whole season, it shows how much they really care about appeasing them. And I think if Americans start to see that, they start to see how fake certain companies are. So I'm not going against the message of Black Lives Matter, but I think if you're going to support it, you should also support a movement across the country that's very similar.
How does it make you feel when you see the NBA really trying to lead in about these social change causes, these social justice causes with the Black Lives Matters movement, but then when they block all this Free Hong Kong stuff, even with the Free Tibet stuff, even the stuff with the Uyghurs, what does that say about American companies willing to kowtow to the CCP just for money, essentially?
It says that we're sort of almost starting to fight a losing battle. If they can start silencing us without having to step foot here, it's like we have the sanctions, but they already have one up on us. So I think it's time for companies people to boycott the companies committing these biased atrocities.
And as far as Chinese companies in America, I know we have TikTok. That's been a controversial app. I know Trump just banned that. Does that matter now? Is that just a Band-Aid solution here?
I think it's important. I think it's a start. It sends a message of what we shouldn't allow in the marketplace, because I think there's certain limitations that we should have as America, such as putting spyware into American hands and having them spied on by foreign agents. Mm-hmm. Even though it's through the guise of an app, I think it's important everyone realizes it's not just an app.
Yeah. So I also wanted to follow up this last thing, because I was kind of thinking about how the Black Lives Matters movement and the Free Hong Kong movement kind of intersects. You said you were American. Americans say they stand up for democracy. I know many of these Black Lives Matters protests are saying that the United States is kind of like this inherently racist space and it's built on white supremacy. So what do you think about that dichotomy between the two? Are you proud to be an American? Do you think it's sown in white supremacy? Should these be the people to kind of help free Hong Kong? And how does this get kind of complicated geopolitically, if you know what I mean?
I think depending on the narrative you follow and what news media, we're either falling apart or we're turning into an authoritarian state. But as long as there's people making that argument, we're still the country that fought against the British to become America, because we're never okay with the status quo. So that means if we're talking about it, if we're having a discussion, we're still the country. We're not the chaos that they're saying we are on television. There may be pockets of it for sure, but I think unilaterally it's two different sides that have almost the same opinions, just have different ways of going about it. And I think it's important for people to realize that, and if they find the common enemy, they see what's happening with the Uyghurs, with the concentration camps, with Hong Kong, they can maybe find common ground for just a second to realize, oh, maybe you're not the enemy, maybe there's someone else that's probably worse.
Absolutely. I had one last question for you. I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't speak about why we have these masks on. We're going through this pandemic now. Trump calls it the Chinese virus. do you think we should be holding China accountable here? How should we be holding them accountable? Or are they just like an honest broker here? Were they a bad actor here with this pandemic? What do you make of that?
There was definitely a cover-up on their end. There's been a whistleblower, Dr. Li Wenyi. She's one of the biologists originally assigned to study the virus after the outbreak in Hong Kong. And after certain discoveries she made, she came to America. And now she's been speaking out on certain news media stations. Mainstream media hasn't really broadcasted her message, but a lot of right-wing media, Fox News, has started to echo it. And then it's starting to go into centrist media too.
Do you think that the Chinese government here were bad actors regarding the pandemic, purposefully letting it spread and things like that, or but no, you think they were ill-meaning?
I think they had intentions to ruin the economy, and I think they believed they themselves could recover quicker, not expecting the damage on their own end. They used this as a guise to take control of Hong Kong, to extend their reach.
I see you have the flag of the United States. You guys are Free Hong Kong protesters. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you guys came out here today?
I wouldn't say I'm a protester, but we are supporting the protesters. And why we are being here is simply because there have been so many issues in Hong Kong, and I know the protests, they are now being sort of paused, and people couldn't get out to the streets to protest. And I think that's why we wanna give some support to Hong Kong.
Yeah. So you're waving the American flag. I don't know if you're American, but are you proud to be here, and are you proud to wave this flag?
I would say, yeah, I have these two identities, as well as Hong Konger, as well as Americans. Yeah. And of course, I'm proud to be these two identities, because these two identities, they represent the core values, including democracy and freedoms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like in some places in the United States, they're having a little bit of an identity crisis. Some people are saying that the United States is racist. There's kind of been also the Black Lives Matters protests that, again, kind of in some senses have been anti-American. So what do you make of those as somebody who's waving the American flag? I know in other protests they burn them. So what do you make of that? What do you make of the Black Lives Matters movement?
Okay, first of all, I wouldn't talk about myself first. Because myself, I read forums in Hong Kong, and they discuss about the Black Lives Matter issues, and some of them maybe they rise up some examples like Antifa. They are being involved in the protest, so sometimes the protesters or Hong Kongers wouldn't like to say too much about the protest. You know what I'm saying?
They don't want to make it political. Would you guys say the Hong Kongers are pro or anti-Antifa? What do you guys think of Antifa?
I have to be honest, I didn't read a lot about the issue, so I don't want to comment about it.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure I'm supporting Black Lives Matter myself personally. As well as other race in China, ethnicity in China, like Uyghurs in China, Tibetans in China, they should.
Like the Tibetans as well.
Yes, yeah. And they ought to have their own rights.
It's very clear that China's a bad actor kind of on the world stage and domestically. What do you think the United States should do in response, right?
So last year there were a lot of different policies, different acts, different bills that were passed by the Congress, but we haven't really seen any real action that was carried out by the U.S. government or just like the world yet. So
I know Trump says he's tough on China. Do you think Trump is tough on China?
I don't believe that a country is run by one person, especially in a democracy. So, he will need to be tough when election comes closer, or like if someone else is on his side, trying to push him to be harder. But I wouldn't necessarily say that he's the harshest person within his entire cabinet. Yeah.
I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about, we're obviously wearing masks here. It's a pandemic right now. Many people are pointing the finger at China.
Yeah.
Trump calls it the Chinese virus.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Should we be holding China responsible for this pandemic? Are they not responsible? What do you think about that?
I think like Chinese virus, this word is like a catchphrase, It's like what Trump loves doing, like to grab attention from everyone. But if you try to examine like this entire coronavirus shit that's going on, you can see that we, including you and I, we are suffering because Chinese, they were trying to hide what's going on in China, and then they were trying to spread this virus to New York, to the other continents, every single where in this world. So yeah, of course they should be held accountable, and then I think people should rethink more. They shouldn't just just because Trump say it's Chinese virus doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold them. Just shouldn't hold Chinese accountable because it's really their fault.
I want to follow up on that point. We're seeing many American companies like the NBA still working with China because it's so financially beneficial. What do you think about American companies that still continue to work with the Chinese government? Does that bother you as a free Hong Konger, or is that just the cost of doing business right now?
In terms of business, it bothers me, but it's something that we cannot change because it's a business. They're here to make money.
Sure. But would you go to an NBA game knowing how close? Yeah.
I don't. I try my best to not use those brands, but it's this world is so interconnected that there's no way that we cannot live by a system that has been built up by the other people. But what I'm doing is just trying my best to not use that product or whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think that if the people that's supporting Hong Kong or the people who are against China cannot provide enough revenue for those businesses, they aren't going to help us. They aren't going to stand by our side. It's the same thing as why feminism, why racism, these issues are welcomed by these corporations. It's because it makes the money.
It's funny because a lot of these corporations are following up on a lot of this Black Lives Matter stuff.
Yeah.
I know that movement's kind of running concurrent to this in many ways.
Yeah.
What do you make about the Black Lives Matters movement? Some of those protests are saying America's a racist country.
Yeah.
I know the free Hong Kongers, view America as a potential liberator. How does that dichotomy work here? Do you think America's a good country on the world stage? What do you think of that?
It really comes down. In a perfect world, we want everyone to be free. Freedom, democracy, liberty, whatever. But in reality, a lot of things aren't perfect. But
do you think America spreads freedom and democracy generally?
I think they spread it to fulfill their agenda, and then what we can do, who are not as powerful as the U.S., what we can do is to, find our place within the system, and then to get as much as what we want. But going back to your point about Black Lives Matter, all those protests, I really support them, because at the end of the day, we Hong Kongers, we want freedom. We want our basic lives need. We want to be protected by a place that we call home. A president or a government that we chose to rule us. So fundamentally, I support them. But yeah, basically.
Very, very cool. Yeah. So we're out here today in Times Square. I see you have a flag. It's a Liberate Hong Kong flag.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why you're out here today?
Because of the CCP that already broke their promise, lied to the world. There's no one country, two system. There's only one country, one system. And they try to expand to influential for the whole world. Right now, they passed the new law, national security law in Hong Kong. Basically, they said they could, they could charge anyone that even if you are not Chinese citizen, you're not Hong Kong citizen, if you say anything against Chinese government overseas, if you're American, you're British, you're Australian, you're Japanese, as you say anything against the Chinese citizen, the Chinese government in your own soil, you will be charged.
Yeah. I know Secretary Pompeo said Hong Kong effectively lost.
Yes.
They lost autonomy about a month or so ago.
Right.
So what is the move going forward now? What do you think the United States' role here should be?
I think first they definitely need to. I don't know what's the word. There's so many politicians get involved with the whole process to literally kill Hong Kong, the freedom of Hong Kong. All that people should be punished, and all their assets outside of China, I think, to my personal opinion, should be confiscated, at least should be freezing.
Yeah. So there's a ton of human rights issues going on with China.
Right.
There's the Uyghurs that are being sent to different work camps.
Right.
There's the Tibetans, the free
Right.
Tibetans too. You
Right.
guys are the free Hong Kongers. There's so many groups. China's kind of just trying to tie this together. Do you think it's the United States' role to come and try to help? Because, I see we're waving the American flag back here
Right.
too. Is this for the United States to intervene? And what's the United States, again, role there? What should we do?
This to me is right now. It's not really just of course a human right, but I think more importantly is to the point that the democracy and the Chinese Communist Party is who will be dominate for the world in the next many decades, maybe for a century to come. If we don't right now, we don't stop the Chinese government, the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, the world will be suffer forever.
I wanted to pivot on this one last point. One of the things that's going on now, not in the world, in the broader world, is this coronavirus pandemic. Many people saying it's originating from China.
Right.
Trump's calling this the Chinese virus. Do you
Yeah.
think that stuff racist? Do you think we need to hold China responsible for the
of course.
spreading of the pandemic? Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. To me, I personally, I believe 100% this is a lab made in China, in Wuhan, the P4, the so-called P4 lab. They definitely manufacturing over there. Exactly what's the point? Is it like they maybe accidentally leaks it, or they deliberately leak the virus all over the world? I don't know. But one thing for sure, they create this the whole coronavirus things. And they want to take advantage of the whole world in the pandemic problem right now. And they want to take over the world right now.
And on the flip side too, we do have many American corporations that do a lot of business with China that's really scared to stand up to them. Specifically the NBA now. I wanted to ask you,
Right.
does it bother you to see the NBA constantly kowtow to the CCP with whatever's going on in their country? The NBA seems to not care. Does that bother you to see American companies not kowtow kind of to the CCP like that?
Like Marvel, Disney. I am very bothered by it. So right now, to me, is this Chinese government always use the market, like a so-called 1.4 billion people, the mass market, to try to take over the world. This is more like a cocaine. Right now, people already taste the effect of the drugs. If you don't stop it right now, it will only getting worse and worse and worse.
Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. If this is your first time here, guys, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay barely informed.